All right, everybody. Hello, inventors and entrepreneurs. My name is Andrew Krause. I'm one of the co-founders here at Inventor Groups of America. Type your name into the chat if you're new here to say I'm new so we can welcome you. That would be great. Also, for everyone new and returning, we'd love to hear your name, what state or country you're from, or any other little fun thing you wanna mention. So go on over right now, open up that chat at the bottom of your screen and let us know. IGA was founded by Stephen Key and myself to teach individuals how to best commercialize their product ideas, as well as strengthen and support inventor groups throughout the nation. As many of you know, Stephen Key and myself also run InventRight, where we coach inventors to license their products for royalties. At IGA, we have speakers on all sorts of different topics that go beyond licensing. We are very proud of the community that we've built and the organization and inventor groups that we help support. IGA also has a directory of local and regional inventor groups on the website. So if you're located near one, we highly encourage you to join. Please don't disclose anything that is confidential. It's not already publicly available. This meeting is being recorded and will be harnessed on our website and YouTube channel soon. If you have any questions for the speaker, please type them into the chat as they come to you. We'll be doing Q&A maybe during, but definitely at the end. And just as you have that thought, go ahead and type it. Ken says he loves doing Q&A, so type your questions into the chat. If we need to, we can also unmute you and you can speak as well. Um, let's see. So, a little bit about our speaker before we get started today. Um, can you guys imagine creating a game that is so beloved that it's still selling after 40 years? That's a reality for Ken Johnson. He's the creator of Phase 10. His product is available in 20 languages and in more than 30 countries. Phase 10 is the second most popular card game of all time. Today, it is licensed and produced by Mattel with worldwide sales of over 4 million games per year. That's crazy time. But that's not all. What we sound like an infomercial there. What we find remarkable is that Ken consistently finds creative ways to explore new markets. I know Stephen wants to talk about this one, which keeps his intellectual property fresh and relevant for the next generation. He's truly a generational game, as you guys can tell. For example, there are multiple versions of the game out now, including Phase 10 Flip, Phase 10 Express, as well as a popular app. With more line extensions launching this fall and planned for next year, is the perfect time to learn the secrets to Ken's success. Join your IGA co-founder, Stephen Key, and myself, Andrew Krause, here for a wide-ranging conversation with Ken Johnson about creativity, intellectual property, the game industry, and licensing. So don't forget to type your questions into the chat. I want to also mention at the end of the hour, Ken's going to give it all for an hour, then he's going to take off, and then Kevin Prince, who is a patent agent, is going to be on, and he can talk to you and answer your inventing questions with regards to intellectual property and patents. Stephen's going to do an intro for him at the end of the hour. So if you guys want to stick around for another half an hour at the end, Kevin Prince, patent agent, is going to answer your patent questions. I know that's pretty long, but we're all about giving value here at InventRight. So, Ken, thank you for sharing your knowledge and experience and coming on for a full hour to answer questions and share your story. So, thank you so much.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Stephen, was there anything you wanted to kick this off with?
Yes, I really do. And thank you, Andrew, for that great introduction. And welcome, everybody. I see some old friends and I see some new friends there. And thank you so much for joining us tonight. What's really amazing about Ken, I've met him a couple times at some events, and he's the nicest guy you ever want to meet. And he's so kind to talk about his journey, and he shares, his experience with a lot of us. And I'm so glad he's here tonight. But he said something to me a little earlier before we started. He said, "Steve, last time I saw you, it was at the Michigan, their big yearly event." And he goes, "You were a rock star." And I kind of thought about it for a minute, and I kind of put a smile on my face, and I said, "Ken, that's nice for you to say that, but you're truly the rock star here. When you have a product that you created that is still selling today, probably better than it's ever sold. And you've been collecting royalties for 40 years and you found a way to keep it alive. You guys, that really sets him apart. You're not going to meet a lot of people that have done what he's done. In fact, most people, I think, that are doing this, you'd be lucky to have a year, 2 years, maybe 10 years is a long time. But 40 years, it's unheard of. So, Ken, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Steve and Andrew. I appreciate it.
Okay. Um, I really want to talk a lot about how to keep something alive. But before we get there, did you ever think when you first came up with this game that it would be selling 40 years from that point? Did you even imagine that? Did you plan for that, or can you even plan for that?
I think you can plan for longevity, but you first have to get it on the shelf, right? And so, my initial goal, though, I was very young when I started, was just to get the game on the shelf. My target was to put a game out there that would be an alternative to Uno. That was my goal, but I never imagined it would be going on for 40 plus years. I mean, back then, I'm thinking Monopoly was, the game that had a long legacy at that point and still does. And that was, way up there. It's just not something you imagine. You just hope to get 5, 10 years of royalties or sales and then hope you can move on or pivot into a new product. That's generally what's thought and how it usually works. But for phase 10 to do what it's done was something I never imagined.
Did you play a lot of games as a child with your family? Is that how this all came about, that you were just someone that loved to play games?
Yeah, absolutely. I created my first game, which was a baseball board game when I was 12 and played it with my family, my siblings for 7 years. And at 19, I decided to try to get that game into the market. And after a couple of years of, learning how this all works, I finally did get it into the marketplace and sold it nationwide to Kmart.
When you were first starting out doing this, was there anybody there to help you, to teach you?
I wish there were people around like you and Andrew, because no, at the time, I didn't know anyone who could help me with this. Um, you didn't have the internet, social media, anything like that. I had to do research the old-fashioned way, which is going to the library and trying to find books on, patenting and trademarks and that sort of thing. And I did eventually run across a gentleman, probably after a couple of years into this, where he helped me figure out how to produce my game myself.
Okay.
He was an independent game inventor, and he invited me to Chicago. He taught me how to source my components to my games, how to get the boards for the board games made. He taught me a lot, but I was very fortunate to run across him, and it helped me in publishing my baseball board game. So yes, I did have a mentor after working on it for a while, and I was very lucky to find that gentleman. But it wasn't easy. Just trying to find people. There's just so much information available today. Again, people like you and Andrew, great resource, invaluable service you guys provide. There's just access to information today is so much easier than it was back then.
Ken, when you were doing this, did you have anybody that was supporting you, or did your friends and family think you were crazy?
Yeah, so a little bit of both. My family, my immediate family, I was still living at home with my parents initially, and they were very supportive, very supportive. But friends thought, you're crazy. You're not going to make money off of games. Um, Very discouraging if I listened to them. But my immediate family were very encouraging. They thought, like most of your family, if you show them your invention, what are they going to tell you? They love you. They think it's the greatest thing since the toaster, right? So that's why when you're getting feedback, it's good to go with other people that will give you an honest opinion. Your family loves you, will tell you that it's great, and it could be great, but they're going to tell you that regardless. But you need to get feedback from people who can look at your product and give you an honest opinion.
Back in the day when you were reaching out to companies, there wasn't the internet, there wasn't Zoom. How did you reach out to companies? Did you go to trade shows or did you just knock on their door, pick up the phone? How'd you reach out to them?
Well, I didn't know anything about trade shows back then. So literally, I went to the library and found a Thomas Register. It listed all the game manufacturers, plus I looked at the back of boxes. So I found Parker Brothers, Milton Bradley, and all those guys, and just sent them a letter that, hey, got this new game. I did it the wrong way. You teach them the right way. And I've since learned the right way to approach companies, but I did it the wrong way. This letter was full of hype and just outlandish, possibilities, right? And it was very unprofessional, the way it really should be done. It was relatively speaking unprofessional. So
Ken, let me guess. Everybody will want one.
yeah, everybody's going to want, we're going to make billions, not millions, billions. And so I've since learned that's not the way to approach companies, right? And I've consulted thousands of inventors like you guys, and I tell them, no, keep it short, very professional. All you want to know in that opening letter or introduction, whether it's a letter, an email, or something, is do they look at outside ideas? Okay. If they do, they'll already have a process, follow the process. That letter should not go into how great it is, how wonderful, how we're all going to make billions of dollars, because it comes off very unprofessional and they think they're dealing with a nutcase inventor. So you have to be very careful how you approach it.
It's really interesting, everyone. Today we have these great tools. We have LinkedIn, we have email, and we have great tools that get to just about anybody. But back then, everybody write you back when you submitted it?
Funny, yes, they did. I submitted, actually, I submitted to 2 or 3 companies, Parker Brothers, Milton Bradley, and I think Social and Ryder. They were a big company back in the day. And they all sent me a response saying either don't send it, because we don't want to look at outside ideas,
Okay.
or yeah, you can send it, but we don't know who you are, and so yeah, and so I just got a very bad vibe, and so I decided, well, I'm going to do this myself,
Okay.
and that's when I decided to figure out how to publish my games.
Okay. So by doing it yourself, how did you go from making it yourself to licensing? How did that transition happen?
Well, I was selling nationwide to Kmart, doing great volume and a number of regional chains here. I'm in Michigan, so there are a number of regional chains here in the Midwest. I was selling the game to, doing very well, had been doing so, producing Phase 10 and a couple of other titles I had launched by then, another card game called Gotcha and Assumption. I had probably 5 or 6 games I was selling. And a company approached me and said, hey, we'd love to license Phase 10 and your other games, but we'd love to license Phase 10. And we put together a deal. At that point, I was interested in going off into another business. And again, not knowing where this thing is going, right? I can get out of the day-to-day production, collect royalties, and do something else. So I took that option. And that's how it started. Someone approached me.
How did you negotiate the licensing agreement? Did you do it yourself or did you bring in a licensing attorney or a patent attorney to help you?
I did it myself. Don't necessarily recommend that. Okay. But I did it myself.
Okay.
I read the agreement, made sense to me, crossed out a few things,
Okay.
negotiated with the guys, and did it myself. But I don't recommend it. I was very fortunate. They were very fair.
Okay.
And so I was not hurt by doing it myself, but I don't recommend that.
Yeah. Well, the industry, the toy and game industry, has been working with outside product developers for years, and I think they know what's fair and balanced. If not, the doors will shut. So, I think you're right about that. They're they want to continue to keep that door open, so they have to be a little bit more fair and balanced.
Yes.
I got a
Um,
quick question for you, Ken. You don't give any numbers, of course, but have you actually made a living off of this product for 40 years?
Yes. From the first year I started licensing, I was making enough to make a living from it. I didn't sit and do nothing. I was 26 or something at the time.
Yeah.
So I went into other businesses. As I indicated, I had something else I wanted to do. So I've launched 4 or 5 different companies over the last 40 years, built them up and sold them. I'm busy now. I have a private equity firm that I launched 5 years ago, and we're doing great. We've made 5 acquisitions. We're working on 2 more right now. So I keep busy. I love business, and the game business was a way to get into business for me.
Oh,
But no, I've been able to make a living from royalties my whole life. In fact, I earn far more in royalties than I do in any companies that I own right now.
let's talk about keeping it fresh. When did it dawn on you that maybe line extensions and doing stuff to keep it current or maybe keep it fresh? When did you realize you needed to do that?
So I think the first extension to phase 10 was actually created by a third party, not my licensee, but a third party. It was the DICE version of phase 10. They actually came up with the idea for the DICE version and the concept, the gameplay, and so on, based on phase 10 and, of course, the brand. And this goes to why it's important to own a brand. I still owned all the trademarks and copyrights while I was licensing. So no one can produce my game. Even Mattel to this day can't change the color of the box or the word of the instructions without my approval. So
Okay.
I retained ownership of all that. So when this company came up with the DICE version, they had to come to me or my licensee and say, hey, I've got this new DICE version of phase 10. What do you think? We liked it and launched it. And it was in the market for about 20 years. So I was receiving royalties on a game that I didn't create, but because it was based off my game and using my name, they had to pay me.
Nice.
So that introduced me to the brand extension thing. And so I came up with Phase 10 Masters in 2000. It's been in the market ever since 2000, doing great. We sell it all over Europe. We don't sell it in its, we have a new iteration of it being launched next fall. Oh, I'm sorry, in the spring, Phase 10 Masters Edition. I think it will be in Walmart. And so, but we've been selling it in Europe for the last 20 years, 24 years. So it's done great. Came up with Phase 10 Twist a few in 2008. It's a board game version of Phase 10. Has a lot of the elements of the card game, but you're going around the board trying to accomplish various things. And it's been in the market since 2008, all over Europe, doing great. And so I have found that the way to keep the brand fresh and alive is a couple things. One, we change the package of the original game every 4 or 5 years. We just change the package so it looks fresh, new graphics, that sort of thing. I don't know if you can see, but on that shelf back there, there are 7 generations of packages of Phase 10. And then we create extensions so that it plays differently, but close enough to the original, but has a different appeal. Maybe it's a shorter version of the game. Phase 10 Express is a cheaper version of Phase 10. It only has 1 deck of cards versus 2. So we sell them in dollar stores. And actually, they requested, the dollar stores came to us and said, hey, we'd love to sell Phase 10, but the original is more, it's above our price point, our market. Can you come up with something less expensive? So Mattel comes to me and says, hey, Ken, can we come up with something less expensive? So I went to the lab, and after a couple of days, I came up with Phase 10 Express, and it was launched, and it's doing pretty good. So keeping it fresh, iterating, holding a brand, developing a brand is very critical, I think, to success. You have to have a brand if you have a consumer product, try to develop a brand, a trademark, own that, because a lot of times a licensee will try to own that brand. But if you own it, then everything that comes off of it develops royalties for you.
Yeah,
So let's
I think that's a very good point, Stephen. So let's see licenses to Mattel and they're selling it, but he needs to retain the rights to use Phase 10 for these other versions, and they don't own the trademark, he does. And that's what you've done, right, Ken?
Yes. However, Mattel produces them all under the same license, but they can't create anything new unless we have a partnership. So there's a partnership there because I still own the brand. So if they create something, they have to pay me.
Nice.
and they have to get approval per the agreement. So a lot of people haven't done that. I mean, I'm very detail oriented when it comes to this brand, and that's another thing I would say is very critical to your success. And I think you mentioned something about this, Stephen, earlier. A lot of people license, and I know people like this. They license their product, whether it's a game or widget, whatever, some consumer product, and they're happy and thrilled they got a license, and they sit back and collect royalties, but they don't have a whole lot of idea of what's happening, where it's sold, what the volume is, what are their plans for the future. They're just happy collecting royalties. And for me, I'm involved in all that. I go to Mattel every year. We sit down, we talk about what we're doing, what the plans are for the future, what iterations can come out. I'm the first person they go to when they want to come up with a new iteration of the game.
Okay.
Can you create something that does this or something that does that? Phase 10 Flip that just went into the market a few weeks ago. It's in Target nationwide. I didn't create that game. Someone on the Mattel side created it, but they came to me and said, "Hey, Ken, we got this new game. Here's the prototype. Can you test it? Tell us what you think. Give us your feedback." And so I did. I tested it for a period of time, took a bunch of notes, said, "Okay, love the game. It's awesome. However, we need to do this. Make sure that, for instance, when a person plays a flip card, it's a requirement that everyone flips because it was unclear in their rules that they came up with. And so I needed to clarify the rules so that it was easily understood by the public. So my point is that yes, if you own your brand, you own your trademarks, copyrights, or patent, if you can retain ownership, it gives you a level of control into the future.
Yeah, I want to talk about two things. Your licensing agreements today are probably a little bit different than when you first started out from
Yes, yes,
okay.
they've changed over the years.
Okay. And you've gotten very good at owning trademarks and new improvements, all that stuff. So you probably have someone that helps you with that makes sure that's done pretty tight,
Yes,
pretty
I have
important.
a legal counsel that helps. Yes.
Okay. So very important to have the right people helping you behind the scenes.
Mhm.
Let's talk about the trademark for just a minute here.
Mhm.
I'm sure that trademark is probably good here in the United States, but other places of the world too. So you have a trademark worldwide? Is that
Yeah.
how that works?
So there's a U.S. trademark, and then there's an EU trademark in other
Okay.
parts of the world. Yes.
Okay. So you've got to keep that current, whatever you have to do, manage that as well. And
Yes.
let's talk about the copyright for a minute, because all these are you everyone, if you're new to this whole world of innovation, creating ideas, you have these wonderful tools.
Mhm.
And these tools help you protect your creativity so you get paid. Okay. And that's
Mhm.
why we're having Kevin on afterwards to talk about how you can protect it in such a way that you're going to keep getting paid. Maybe not 40 years, maybe 40 years, maybe longer. I don't know.
Mhm.
But you have to have that. Let's talk about copyright for a minute. What have you copyright on your game? Is it the play of the game and do you copyright all the iterations? How does that all work?
So yes, it's the play in the form of the rules, the instructions. Okay,
Okay,
you copyright the rules, the instructions, and in every iteration they have their own separate copyright.
got it. Perfect.
Yeah, and then
Now, do you have
the
any other
beauty of
protection?
copyright, they last a lifetime of the author plus 70 years, 70 years after they're
Yeah,
gone.
we gotta talk about that, Stephen. I mean, a patent isn't nearly that long, and
Yeah,
so
what's
when
wrong
you
with
have
that?
a game, I mean, his kids are going to be collecting royalties or relatives or whatever because you can go well beyond it. Now, most games don't sell that long, but in his case, it's probably going to sell for another
Yeah, but
40 years.
what I have a beef with the USPTO then. I don't understand. I think patents should be lifetime, and I think everything should be lifetime, but that's a whole nother argument with the USPTO. Maybe we should get them online and ask them about that.
Now, guys, that doesn't mean you guys are all going to copyright your ideas. The copyright thing is very unique to board games and card games. It's
Right.
not going to apply to 99% of other
Books,
inventions
yeah,
out there.
books, music, art,
Yeah.
those things are copywritten. Utility, which your patent expert will talk about, is a whole different animal. And I think the reason, Stephen, there's a difference, and your expert probably would know better, but copyrights are expressions of ideas. They're an expression of art or an art form. So that's why they last so much longer. It's an expression, whereas a patent is covering the utility of something and how it does whatever it does. And oftentimes that becomes obsolete after a while, or there's other technology that makes whatever you've patented obsolete. Just think of it. Most, you're expert. I'd be curious to hear what he has to
Well,
say.
I
But
think you're right, but
most patented things do not retain their uniqueness, or I shouldn't say that they don't retain their their ability to be as effective or as efficient in solving whatever the problem as technology advances. So I think that's why patents have a shorter lifespan, because they want continued innovation in whatever that thing is. So whereas you don't innovate an expression of an idea, you can't innovate that.
all right. Okay, I'll take 30 years then. Give me a couple more years here, okay? Maybe not lifetime, but I want a few more here.
Yeah.
So what's really important, everybody, is that you need to have the right intellectual property. You're right. Some things will have a utility patent. With Kevin, we're going to talk about provisional patent applications and that whole world too. And design patents are really strong too. Do you have any other types of intellectual property? Did you ever file a PPA or any of that stuff, or it doesn't really work with the game?
No. Now, some people will file for patents on games,
Okay.
particularly if they involve a device of some kind.
Okay.
Think Uno Attack, for instance. They would probably, if they could, I don't know, patent that device that shoots the cards out. So yes, you could do it for something like that. But when you're talking about a board game, basically paper and printing, that sort of thing, it's a copyright.
Wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Andrew, why don't we do this? I could ask a million questions.
Well, we got some good questions here. We could always
Let's jump in with some of the questions. Because
Yeah.
we're always
Yeah. So, Ed, I think it's Ed here. Thanks for presenting, Ken. What is the best way of establishing connections with the right people at the companies that will license your card game ideas? I understand and have experienced barriers to getting into the right people.
Okay, so if you've got a game, actually, games is an industry that they're very open to new ideas. So if you go to Mattel and Hasbro, which are the two largest probably in the world, they too will say they will look at your idea, but the reality is they would prefer to take on proven products. So they prefer you go to what I call the second tier companies, which is anyone other than Hasbro and Mattel that publishes games. And most of those companies will be happy to look at your new game idea. They thrive on that. They live on that. Contrary to popular belief, most new games are innovated by independent game inventors, not the labs inside of the toy companies. They take their brands and iterate on successful brands. That's why Barbie has all these extensions and iterations of Barbie and Hot Wheels. They do that. But as far as creating something new, no, that's not really in their wheelhouse. So if you have a game, go to anyone other than Hasbro and Mattel, and you can just go down the toy aisle, look up on the internet, anybody. There are a number of companies. Contact them, their website. Some of them will even look at submissions through their website. Contact them, short and sweet. Don't tell them how great and wonderful the game is. Just tell them, ask them, do they look at innovative outside ideas? If they say yes, follow their process. If they say no, draw a line through them and go to the next.
Hey, Ken, tell me, a lot of us inventors are afraid someone's going to steal our idea. How did you get over that fear? Or should we be fearful? Because this industry does work with a lot of us. Mm-hmm. How do I get over that fear? Or is that just not realistic?
I don't think it's realistic. I've learned that. 99.9% of the time, most of the companies are fearful to introduce a new idea. So they're not going to steal your idea and introduce something brand new that they've just stolen. They don't know if it's going to work or not. That's why the major companies don't innovate new ideas. And Hasbro and Mattel in my industry, they prefer you. I'll give you an example. So there's a game called Apples to Apples. A lot of your listeners are probably familiar with it. A very successful game, probably been around 15, 20 years, doing well. It's licensed to Mattel. Well, the major toy companies rejected it. A small little company called Out of the Box, I think they were in Wisconsin somewhere, said, okay, we'll try it. They get it into the marketplace. It becomes a big hit. After 7 years, guess who's knocking at Out of the Box's door with a check for 30, $40 million trying to get the license?
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what they would prefer, pay millions of dollars for a proven product.
Later.
And now their bean counters can sit and figure out, okay, how are we going to make money with this thing? We know where the market is. We know where it's going. We know what it's done. Here's what we can take it in distribution. So they can figure that out. It's just math at that point.
Got it.
So they don't have to try to figure out if the market wants it. Okay. Let the small companies figure that out. We'll throw big checks at them and take it from here. That's how they ended up with phase 10 in part. My initial licensee ran into financial trouble. I was in litigation with them, which is a long story. We don't have time today. And as part of the settlement of my lawsuit, I said, okay, you got to transfer the license to Mattel. And Mattel had been trying to get it from this small company for years.
Okay.
But they wanted to keep it. So when it's successful, the majors will come after it. Meanwhile, the smaller players who can be just as good as launching it as the big ones, okay, they'll launch it, they'll take a chance, get it out there, start making everybody money, and then the big companies will step in.
Got it. Have you had any problems with copycats and knockoffs?
I've been fortunate. We have not had any problem to speak of, not in the physical space. We've had one issue I'm familiar with in, and to kind of, not to correct you guys, but you probably have old information. Phase 10 is available in about 60 countries right now. And we had a company in, I think it was in Egypt, completely knock off the game. And it was, the funny thing is, it was an old iteration, like 4 packages ago. They knocked it off and was trying to sell it. And so Mattel found out about it, and we went after them and shut them down. So that's the only knockoff in the physical space I'm familiar with. The app world is a different story. We've literally had to go into the App Store and get Google and Apple to pull down knockoffs of our app. It plays like Phase 10. They'll even sometimes call it Phase 10, and we know it's not us. So we go to Apple or Google, prove that we own that trademark, and they immediately pull it down.
You know, sometimes having a trademark and a copyright is a great tool, especially for online. People take it down pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Let's talk about, do you ever have to audit a company to make sure they're paying you?
Well, I have not audited Mattel. I've been with them since 2010. Okay. I feel good about the royalties. There have been a couple of times that they have self-audited and said, hey, Ken, here's an extra check. We realized we shorted you, or we didn't have this. And so that was great. Unexpected check, 5 figures. So it was pretty cool to get that check. And then there have been times where they actually did an audit and said, oh, Ken, we overpaid you on this. Okay. So we're going to have to, they're pretty good about it, but auditing can be expensive. Yes. And I have not felt the need to, but I've reserved the right. I can go in once a year and do an audit. I highly recommend that every licensor has in their agreement the right to audit. Some companies want to limit the window within the year you can do it, it's not to disrupt their business, and that's fine. They say, okay, for this 3-month period in any given year, you can do an audit. That's fine. But I did do an audit of my former licensee, and we found a lot of problems. So,
can you, looking back at the licensing deals that you've done, is there a couple clauses in there that you would just kind of tell us? Just be aware of these clauses. They're they're kind of something maybe you don't pay attention to, but they could come back to bite you. Is anything that you've seen over the years?
Hmm. Well, I usually recommend audit rights.
Okay.
I recommend that you have a guaranteed minimum royalty. A lot of them won't put that in there, but
Okay.
you want a guaranteed minimum royalty, some amount that you agree upon. Everything's negotiable, by the way. When they send you their first draft of the license, it's negotiable. Don't think you have to go with it. So you want a guaranteed minimum, which means that regardless of how many games they sell, they're going to pay you this minimum amount.
Got it.
And if they don't achieve that, that's fine. They still have to pay you that. And then you want here's something I found that's very interesting. You want to what I call an escalator of that minimum.
Oh,
So my first license deal, it ran for about 22 years before we switched to Mattel. It had a minimum that was great that first year, but as the royalties started climbing, this minimum amount looked like nothing.
mm,
So I learned from that, and my deal with Mattel set a minimum, and I think every 5 years, that minimum goes up by a certain dollar amount.
okay.
So that way, it kind of keeps pace with the rising of the royalty itself.
Nice.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Is there any way to calculate that minimum guarantee?
No, I mean that's all. If you are with your first licensee, it's going to be guesswork. Everyone's going to guess. Okay, what do we think we're going to sell? What do we think that royalty is going to look like? So it's kind of guesswork. Um, so you negotiate with them based on what their projections are, what you can both agree to as a minimum.
Okay.
You might something you might want to do is say the minimum will be adjusted. It's this number, but it will be adjusted in 3 or 5 years to whatever the trailing 12 month minimum is. So it's going
Hmm.
to adjust based on reality, what actually is occurring. And then that sets the new minimum, and then it goes from there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Hey, what
Okay.
do you think about Kickstarter campaigns to launch games?
I've never done them. I've seen people do them. Um, I know a couple of people that have had success doing that.
Okay.
Um, But in my view, retail is the way to go. There are exceptions. You know, you got Exploding Kittens, and you had Cards Against Humanity that were big hits doing it online.
Yeah.
Eventually, they went into retail. But generally speaking, I prefer to get into retail. However, I do recommend if you can't find a licensing partner, then if you want to launch it yourself, Kickstarter is a way to do it. If you can just show your potential licensee that you've proven the concept, people want to buy this game, people are recommending this game. You don't have to sell 100,000. If you sell 10, 20,000 a year, there will be these second tier companies I've talked about that will line up to get your item.
Got it. How many, if this is the confidential information, please don't share it, but can you give us a ballpark number of how many stores you're in?
Stephen, I don't know. But we are in because my royalties don't reflect stores, they reflect items.
Got it.
So, but we're in every major retailer in this country. So I mean, Walmart has probably, I think, over 5,000 stores. Target probably has 15, 1,800. We're in every place. Every place that sells games, we're pretty much there.
Yeah,
So it's
it's hard.
probably over 10,000 stores, I would guess.
Yeah, probably more than that even. You know what's really interesting, everybody, when you're negotiating that licensing agreement and you're talking about your royalty statement, and I don't think I've ever really talked about this, you can ask for them to show you the retail places it's being sold in.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
sometimes that's important, sometimes it's not. But if you can get an idea of where it's selling and what stores, that might help you later if you have to relicense it. That might be some information for, I don't know, maybe I'm just curious because I've seen it done both ways.
Yeah.
Oh
I
yeah.
initially when we were much smaller in volume, Yeah, we did get royalty statements reflecting the stores,
Yeah.
but it got to be so crazy that they
Yeah.
just said, hey. And so Mattel does it by SKU,
Yeah.
and I get an idea of what store is doing what because some of the stores have their own SKUs. So, for instance, Walmart has its own SKU for Phase 10. So I
Hmm.
know how many games we're selling in Walmart by just identifying that SKU. And they send me an electronic file, and I take that file and I put it through a software thing I developed, and I know how many games are sold in any given month, any year over year. I can track this. Like I said, I'm real, I guess you would say, anal about how I deal with my business, and but that's important. I think if you want long term success, you have to pay attention to what's happening.
Yeah.
So I've got a question here. Do you ever do signings? Because I have a deck that's signed, and I really love this. This is like a very precious thing to me.
Yeah.
Do you ever do events where you sign them for people or go to stores to do that at all?
Never done any stores or anything like that. Only at the various conferences I've been to. I'll take a dozen games or so. I usually do a question and answer session, kind of review of what I've talked about.
Yeah,
And whoever gives me the right answer, I give them a game and then I go sign them. So that's
nice.
about it. But yeah.
Yeah.
Stephen, we have some questions if you want to get
Okay,
some questions here.
sure.
All right. This one's from Adam. Ken, you mentioned that once you get approval to pitch to a company that you should use their process. What if their process is submitting to an online portal? I've found this to be common in the toy and novelty industry. How should one navigate that? So he's basically asking, what do you think of portals and, basically following their process?
Well, I communicate a lot with Mattel through a portal. And
Really?
yes, yes. So now, when it comes to their universe of licensees, they communicate when they're talking to their universe of licensees. It's done through a portal. When I'm dealing with them specifically about my game, I talk to the VP of this and the VP of that. So I have relationships with important people there. But when they're dealing with their licensees in general, it's all communicated through a portal. Um, and again, in this industry, a lot of them use portals, and I found nothing wrong with it. Um, I am beyond that. So when I'm dealing with them, they know me, I deal with them directly. But people I know who are trying to get into the companies have gone through portals and been successful. So I don't know that there's a problem. Follow their process doesn't mean, and again, if they submit a license agreement to you and you think the royalty rate's too low, or they don't have this guaranteed minimum clause, or didn't mention anything about audit rights, it's all negotiable.
Okay, this one's good. This is a really good one. For because we might have some budding like card or board game designers here. It's from Edgar. What trends in game design have you identified? You don't have to give anything up you don't want to. What are the trends these days?
That's
It's a
a good
very broad question, I know.
That's a good question. I have found it can be trendy, particularly when I call game slash toy. So there was a game called Pie Face that was really popular, and every company was trying to come up with some iteration of Pie Face. And then there was one where Don't Step in the Poo or something like that, some board game where there was a simulation of dog poo and that sort of thing. Everybody was trying to do that. So right now, I'm not sure what's out there as trending. That's a good question. I'm not really sure.
I think a better question is how could they observe trends? And because that is a big thing in the toy and game industry.
Yes,
It's
it
very important to observe trends, I think.
very important. Well, you know what I do in an effort to observe trends and see what's out there is literally every 3 months I go to two or three Target stores, two or three Walmart stores, two or three specialty bookstores. In my area, it's Barnes and Noble. Your mileage might vary wherever you are. It could be Books a Million or someone else. But you go to a specialty retailer, a large drugstore, um, two or three Walmarts, two or three Targets, and just see what they have on their shelf. If you have a toy item, whatever it is, look what toys are out there. Games, I try to see what games are out there. What's popular? What is has been popular and trending in the game area has been more adult themed games. That's a very big deal. Now it's not brand new, but it's in the last probably since COVID or around COVID. With Cards Against Humanity, it opened a whole new door to these adult themed games. So I think that's waning a bit right now. But yeah, so you can identify that just by seeing what's on the shelf at the stores.
You know what's really interesting about trends? I was interviewed a game designer and I asked him about trends, and he said you have to be careful with trends a little bit because if you're starting to follow a trend, you're probably a little late.
You're too late. You're too late.
Yeah, because
Absolutely. If
yeah,
unless this has a long-term cycle, like you see, like again, the adult theme games, they've been doing this for a few years now. You're probably still a little too late right now, but they're still introducing new ones, new iterations of that kind of game.
yeah,
But you're absolutely right. If you find a toyish kind of game, and I mean, when I mean toy, I mean some kind of mechanism or whatever. By the time you create it, get it designed,
I know.
get a company to say yes, we'll take it, they get a chain to buy it, you're 2 years down the road. That trend is gone by
Yeah,
then.
that's what he was saying. If you could look out ahead and get ahead of a trend, then it's a smarter move. But you're absolutely right. Just the whole development time it takes, it probably won't be popular at the time that it launches. Yeah, you can
Yeah,
lose that window.
right.
I thought that was really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Stephen, I got a smart question from Kevin, our other speaker at the top of the hour. He's going to jump on. He said, Ken, sounds like you negotiated for the licensee to handle the enforcement of your IP rights. Was that difficult for you to get them to agree to?
No, actually, I didn't. So um, the way my deal works is I own because I owned the trademark before Mattel came along. Because again, they came along in 2010. I had my game trademark in phase 10 in 82. So I owned it a long time. Um, and so I retained all the ownership rights to domestic. Where I didn't have trademarks, they applied for those trademarks in certain parts of the world. Um, but if there's ever a breach in our agreement, those trademarks come back to me as part of the deal. But they enforce any infringement. My only obligation when it comes to infringement is to notify them if I spot any.
Hmm.
That's my only obligation. Beyond that, they will enforce against infringers. They told me about the Egypt problem because we happen to be talking about our problem with digital, and they wanted me to confirm. They were unfamiliar with the package that the Egyptian infringer was using, because again, it was 4 or 5 packages ago, 2 packages before Mattel even got involved, and they're thinking, this isn't our package. It looks like the old package of his former licensee. Can you take a look at this and authenticate it or tell us if it's an infringement? And I can look at it and in 2 seconds say, no, this isn't what we did. So, yeah.
Hmm.
In your licensing agreement, it doesn't state that they have the option to litigate. It's not required, but they have the option, or does it actually say they will do that?
It says they will do it.
Oh, you actually,
If
that's very,
litigation is necessary, in other words, if we can't come to some settlement with the infringer, get them to pull their infringing product, then if litigation is necessary, it's their obligation to do it.
wow. You don't see that too often.
Yeah,
I got a question for you,
yeah.
Ken. Do you consider yourself a toy and game inventor or a game inventor? And with that, after you answer that, what are some just it could be short little tips, it could be something really important, it could be something just that you give. What are the best tips you have to inventors that are getting into toy and game inventing? What is the big picture? What's the mindset stuff? What mindset do they need to be in? What's the wrong mindset and what's the right mindset? Maybe from some lessons that you've
I
learned
consider
yourself.
myself a game inventor in the toy and game space, right? But I'm a game inventor, and I think the mindset of a game inventor is, developing something that people truly love. I mean, when you're testing, there are two things that are really critical. It's testing your game. And that means, you got a game that, four players, you invite four people over to your house. It could be relatives. You could start with them, but you don't stay with relatives. Remember what I said earlier, relatives will tell you, hey, it's awesome, we love it. So maybe you start with relatives. Invite four family members to your house. Test it thoroughly. But part of that testing is testing the rule book, which is the most important part of developing a new game, are the instructions. The reason they're so important is you can't be in millions of households telling people how to play the game. So they have to be able to read the instructions, understand it, and play it according to Hoyle, the way you want it played. So you're testing the gameplay with four people, and you give the rules. You're not playing the game, by the way. You got a pad and a paper. You're sitting in the corner. You give the rules to one of the four, not the PhD among them, but just the average person. Give them the rule book and say, read the instructions, teach the other three players how to play, and you guys start playing. I'm gonna sit over here and watch. Okay. And that's what you do. And as they start playing, you observe them, see if they're playing correctly. If they're playing incorrectly, you say, hey, you're not playing that just right. I'm not going to tell you how to play it correctly because you never do that during this testing. You say, the answer is in the rule book. Please refer back to it. Okay. And if a scenario comes up that they can't remember, again, refer them to the rule book. If something comes up during that testing that you don't have a solution for in your rule book, then that's why your pad of paper is there. You have to write out a solution to that scenario, and you revise your rule book. And then you test it again. And the next time you test it is with four people that have never played. Every time you test it, it's with brand new people that have never played. You don't ever play with any of them. You sit in the corner and you give one of them the rule book, say, guys, go at it. I'm going to sit and watch. So never play it with people you're testing with. Don't answer their questions. Refer them to the rule book. And if it's not in the rule book, you use your pad and paper, you come up with a rule, and you revise your rule book. And your game isn't ready for market until you've done all that.
Hey, I've got one question, Andrew, before we give our
That was a great. That was you guys. If you guys are toy or game inventors, you need to follow that to a T. With Ken, did we lose him there? Oh no, he's down here. You jumped down there. Yeah, really great advice. Go ahead, Stephen.
Yeah, no, before we say get all the thank yous and take a picture, I've got one question. Your game seems to just sell every year, every day. Are you using, is anybody using social media to show how people to play for the first time? TikTok, Instagram, any of those media platforms? Is it you? Do you hire somebody, or the company's doing that? Or maybe they don't do it at all. They don't need to.
Yeah, they don't do it at all. We've never marketed, we've never advertised, we just put it on the shelf. My goal when I was selling it to the Kmart buyer 42 years ago was, could you put this on the shelf next to Uno? And he said, yeah, I can do that. So my goal was thinking that if it's on the shelf next to Uno, when people go down the game aisle, they would see Uno and say, what's that there? Okay. And they would try it. And that's why I said it's so critical about the instructions, the rule book. I play tested the heck out of it with my friends because I made a mistake in my baseball board game I talked about. Never played it with anybody, put it on the shelf, didn't quite work. So test the rules. That's the most important aspect of it. It's got to work. People have to understand it. And you can go from there.
Ken, you're the best. Great.
Hey, guys, before we switch
good?
to, yeah, that was
good
incredible.
information. Let me hear. Let me
yeah.
Come on.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay.
Awesome.
So, hey, our social media manager is going to give me a hard time if we don't do a family group shot. So, if you could give a thumbs up or a wave and a smile, I'll take a couple pictures here. So, if you guys could do that, that would be great. There, I got page number 1, and then now page number 2. And then the other pages, we don't have people on video. So we got 4 pages here. All right. Good deal. Thank you, guys.
Okay.
I think
thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's time for me to take off, but I
Well,
appreciate the opportunity to share. I love doing this, Steve, as you know, and so this is great. And I love answering questions. So
you're
anything
such
I
a
can do, I'm
yeah,
glad.
you're such a giving person. Thank you so much. You guys, if you could put your thank you notes in real quick, we like to collect those. We'll send them back out. Uh, Ken, you're the best. Thank you
Oh,
so much.
something I didn't mention. I have a book that goes into a lot of things we just talked about. It's on Amazon. It's called The Simple Plan: 6 Easy Steps to Make Millions from Your Ideas. So I
Sure.
break it down to 6 steps. It doesn't matter if it's a game, a widget, doesn't matter. You follow these 6 steps. It helps you
Do
get
you
your
have
game.
that book? Do you have that book someplace in your office you could put it
I
up, show
do.
it? Let me see it.
So it's called the Simple Plan book. So I put that into the chat. This is Ken Johnson. So if you guys could,
Let's see it. Let's see it.
yeah, there you
All
go.
right, there it is, you guys.
Cool.
Thank you, Ken, for showing that, and thank you for your time.
Sure. Thanks for the opportunity to help. Love doing it. Good luck to you inventors out there, and hopefully we'll see you on the shelf someday.
And
Thank you
for
so
those
much.
of you, I know this is gonna, yes, for those of you, I know it's gonna mean a lot to Ken. So he took an hour of his time to inspire you and give you advice. If in the chat you could type something besides thank you, type something a little more personal,
Oh, come
that would be
on, Andrew.
great. Like, and your name, that would be great, and we'll send that over to Ken. So you got plenty of time to do that because we'll be hanging around here for half an hour with Kevin. So
All right,
Thank
take
you,
care, everyone.
Ken.
All right, bye
thank you,
bye.
Ken. Bye.
Hey, before we start, I just want to do a couple shout outs to some of the people in the audience. We have one of our coaches there from Inventors, Carl, all the way from Australia. Thank you for joining us. We also have another superstar here. Rick, raise your hand. There he is right there. He sold, I think he's selling million. You're selling millions now, right? I mean, of your product, the Great Plate. Rick, let's see if we can you unmute him
Yeah,
real
I
quick,
can
Andrew?
unmute him. Yeah, yeah. Sorry. Also a former IGA speaker too.
Yes. How
Thank
you
you,
doing, Rick?
Stephen. Yeah, we just went over 24 million units.
Wow.
You guys, we have to have him back on to talk about how he's doing it. He's got a lot of different products. He's killing it out there. He knows how to do it. So, Rick, we'll have you back if you want to come back and help us. All right.
Love it. Yes, happy to.
Okay. You guys, I want to introduce Kevin Prince for a minute here. Kevin, thank you for joining us.
No, thanks for having me.
And I'm not going to stay on too long, you guys, but I want to say a few things about Kevin. And I want to talk about your best friend. Your best friend in the inventing community, hopefully, is people like Andrew and myself and the coaches, of course. But your next best friend is the person that's going to protect you. And you saw how important it was to have the trademarks and the copyrights, and in our world, PPAs, patents, design patents. Those are tools that maybe you need them, maybe you don't. But I can tell you one thing. It makes it a lot easier for a company to pay you if you started the filing process. And especially if you file the PPA, sometimes you get a company to pay for the non-provisional. And Kevin Prince, I've known for over 20 years because he started this amazing inventing club, just like how I met Andrew down in Orange County. Because Kevin is one of us. He's an inventor. He looks at things a little bit differently. And I've used a lot of patent attorneys over the course of my career, but I use Kevin Prince right now. He does a good job for me. And he's working on some really big stuff. So, Kevin, you better do a good job for me. There, I'm putting pressure on you right now. And he's covering intellectual property for me, from design patents to we're even filing PCT. We're going around the world with our stuff. Your IP professional that helps you is your next best friend. So if you need someone, make sure you reach out to Kevin. He does a great job, or find someone that you like. But you guys, make sure you find someone that does a good job, good referral, and that's going to provide you with everything you need to make sure that companies are going to treat you fairly. Kevin, thank you so much for helping me for so many years.
Oh yeah, well, thank you, Stephen. It's been great, and I really appreciate all the work you're doing too.
Okay, guys, I'm out of here. I'll
So,
let you take over, and I'll see you guys next time.
see you, Steven. So don't forget to type your thank yous to Ken Johnson in the chat. That would be great. I'm going to be co-hosting with Kevin here for half an hour, and we're going to be doing Q&A on patents. He's a patent agent. Maybe Kevin can briefly talk about, while the questions come in, what the difference between a patent attorney and a patent agent is, Kevin.
Yeah.
There's always a percentage of people that don't understand that.
Yeah, well, so I'm an engineer and out of UC Berkeley. Patent agents and patent attorneys have to have a 4-year degree either in engineering or in science. So we have to have the technical know-how to, talk about products and explain how to make them and use them. That's what a patent is in large part. The difference is with a patent agent like myself, I didn't go on and get a law degree. So patent attorneys are engineers or scientists, and they have a law degree. So they can go beyond the patent office and sue somebody for infringement in court or handle your licensing agreements. I can't do any of that. All I can do is practice in this one little area called patent prosecution at the patent office. I can represent you to the patent office just like an attorney, but I can't go beyond that. I can't go, start doing your licensing agreements or anything that would be considered, the practice of law. So that's kind of the difference. Patent agents tend to be a little bit less expensive. We don't have quite the overhead. On the other hand, we can't get the big wins on litigation, either. So, but that's okay. I like what I do because it's always new by definition. And, it's just exciting to help inventors like myself, protect your idea so that, like what Stephen said, the playing field is somewhat level, and even the big companies have to deal with you. So that's kind of the way I approach it.
So let's go ahead and jump into Q&A. Thank you, Kevin.
Yep.
That was a very thorough answer. And I bet you maybe up to a third of the people didn't know that. So that's very helpful. I'm just going to the absolute oldest question that had to do with patents, and then I'm going to go down from there.
Yeah, sounds great.
Ola said, Kevin Prince, since a PPA will be slaughtered, okay. Wow, Ola, we're getting dramatic there. When a non-provisional patent is manufactured, okay. What stops me from listing 10 products in the same provisional patent application and save 9 application fees? Okay, so what he's saying, guys, and I know Kevin knows what he's saying. He's saying, I pay $60 for each provisional. Can I just throw 10 different inventions in one provisional and be covered and save myself a few bucks? So Kevin, have you ever I'm sure you've gotten that question
Yeah.
before.
Well, and the answer is yes. You can put whatever you want really in a provisional, but there's a drawback that you might not have thought of, and that drawback is that, let's say I have 3 inventions. Let's say they're very different, and I put them all in a single provisional application, and then within the year I decide, okay, I'm going to go forward with the first one with a non-provisional, and I'm not going to go forward with the second or the third one yet. When you file the non-provisional for the first invention, and that patent issues or is published, the provisional is also published. And so now your second and third inventions are in the public domain, and you may not have wanted that. Maybe you want to wait on that one. So for $60, I would keep them separate if you can.
Yeah, so that could be really problematic.
Yeah. On the other hand, if you want to go forward with all 3 inventions at the same time within the year, you can do that, and you can reference the same provisional on all of those. That's fine. But you're paying for 3 non-provisional applications at that point, all at the same time, so that can get kind of onerous as well. So I think it's just easier and better to keep your options open by putting them in separate applications.
Great. Let's see what the next patent question is here. Um, let's see.
Let me just say, by the way, Ken's wisdom on his answers was just off the charts. I mean, he has obviously really gotten into that, and he knows a lot of stuff. So I would definitely pick up his book and watch this again, watch his presentation again, because you'll pick up some more nuggets, I'm sure.
Yeah, I would like to make a really quick comment on that. So I don't want all you guys to think that you're always going to be licensing a trademark and a copyright. Copyrights are really pretty much for board games, card games, games, and it's very, very strong. So I'd actually make the argument is stronger than a patent. It won't apply to most of your consumer or industrial products at all. It's specifically to board games, but not only does it last a lot longer, but it's you can just compare them, right, Kevin? You can go, well, these are the
Well,
rules here, and look,
yeah,
this company in Egypt, they just copied the rules, like
the
violation.
copyrights are really strong for things that are of an artistic expression,
Hmm.
because that has longevity, right? But like Ken was saying, a widget 20 years from now might be obsolete. And the interest of the government is to promote progress. And the way they do that is they let you spill your guts in a patent application, explain exactly how you make your product, and then they give you a monopoly on that for 20 years. But the hope is that 5 years later, some other smart inventor is going to say, you know what, I can improve that. And they get their patent on their idea for 20 years. And that's how progress happens. So that's kind of the
Hmm.
idea of why the patent office even exists. It is separate from the copyright office. And also to Ken's point, the way you should think about patents is that 20 years, or in the case of design patents, 15 years, that monopoly that you have for that period of time should be spent building your brand. That Phase 10 brand is far more valuable than a patent ever would have been on that game. And same with Monopoly. Monopoly was a patent, but when it expired, people could come out with a very similar game, but they couldn't call it Monopoly, right? And so that brand name is what you're really trying to invest in for while you have the patent in force, because the trademarks can last forever. You just renew them every 5 years or 10 years, and how long has Coca-Cola had their brand? 100+ years.
One of the things with consumer products in particular, though, you need to realize is when a company wants to license your product, they're going to want to bring it in-house, probably under their own brand,
Yeah,
probably under their own name. And what Kevin did is truly amazing, but to insist that they use your name and you want to own the name, or they want to put it under their name, under their company name, and to say, well, now I own that, that's not realistic. In Ken's case, it made sense. He had a card game, it had its own brand, he licensed it to Mattel, and he was able to do that. But that's not normal or typical.
yeah, that
Um,
can be hard to do. And I mean, if you're going to try to do that, make sure you own the .com domain name. You make it a big package deal so that the whole thing is a big turnkey um, offering. And if they like the name, great. But a lot of companies, they want to build their own brand, and it may not, your brand may not work with their overall strategy for brands. So, yeah, I don't know if I would die on that hill. If it's going to kill the licensing deal, then probably not.
Right. And most of you have a name you really love for your invention, but hey, as long as the checks are in your name, you'll be good with it. You don't want to kill a licensing deal over insisting that you use your own brand or own name. A lot of times they'll want to make it theirs. So I'm just paging through here to look for okay, here we go. Is a design patent or utility patent better for non-electric toys besides card and board games? Well, I know Kevin's going to give the famous answer that everybody loves to hear from attorneys,
It
which is what,
depends.
Kevin? There
It
you go. Yeah, I
depends.
knew it.
Yeah, and no, but you're right, Andrew. That's the case. And here's the kind of the interesting thing. In I believe it was 2013, there were two Supreme Court cases called Bilski and Alice, which actually made it more difficult to get utility patents on games. Like Monopoly, it had a patent when, I don't know, when was that, in the 40s or something, 1940s. I don't think they could have gotten that in the current legal environment now because there's just different sets of rules on what you can patent. And a lot of games would be considered non-patentable subject matter now because the physical pieces of the game itself are not being transformed while you're playing. And we didn't used to have that requirement. So you need to talk to your patent practitioner. If you have a game, you need to talk to them and really figure out, does this even work for a utility patent? Maybe it is a combination of design, patent, copyright, and trademark. And of course, domain name if you can get it.
I like to give the example as far as board games go, like Mousetrap. Remember that old game Mousetrap where things move and fall? A board game needs to have functionality and
Yeah,
utility,
like
and most board
operation,
games don't.
right? Operation, where
Operation, yeah, yeah.
something like
Now,
that. Now, if it's just a board game where you open it up and there's an image and nothing changes, there's nothing functional about that other than it's a playing surface, that might be a hard one to get these days. Maybe,
fortunately, the copyright really protects you well with games. Yeah.
right. Well, maybe the pendulum's going to swing back and the Supreme Court will reverse that someday. But right now, it's difficult to get utility patents on it's just a standard board game.
Now, Karen was saying non-electric toys, not board games or card
Yeah.
games. So design patent or utility. Now, you're an expert at design patents, and you
Yeah,
find a lot, but I think most of the time with most toys, if you can get a utility, that's going to be better, isn't it? Most of the time.
if you can, yeah. I mean, it's kind of like, what I say is it's kind of like saying men are stronger than women. Utility patents are stronger than design patents, but I've seen some pretty weak men and some pretty strong women. So,
I like that.
so you really, it is kind of a case by case basis. You have to look at it. For non-electric toys, the assumption there I'm making is that there's really nothing functional about it. It may just be a design patent.
Well,
And
no,
just
no, that's not true. I mean, it could be like a GI Joe with an arm that moves, has some mechanical feature that helps you throw
Okay, well, right. If you
something.
have some kind of physical, either electronic or mechanical functionality, and that is new, which is the key if, then yeah, you could look at utility patent, but it's gonna be, utility patents are harder to get in general, but they're considered stronger if you can get them. And just so people know, a design patent protects the ornamental appearance or the way something looks, not the way it works. And utility patents are the opposite. They protect the way it works, regardless of what it looks like. So the example I use is sunglasses. If you have a pair of sunglasses that has a unique style, but it works the same way as every other pair of sunglasses, then for that, you would have to have a design patent. You're not going to get a utility patent on it because it works the same way as every other pair of sunglasses. But if you were the first person to invent polarized lenses, now for that, you'd want a utility patent because you don't care what the competitor's product looks like. If they're using polarized lenses, you want to be able to go after them for the functionality of that. So that's kind of the difference.
Jose said, what is your comments or feedback about those PPAs elaborated by a template or AI questionnaire? What are the drawbacks of using them? So AI is really getting out there a lot. We have a solution at InventRight called Smart IP that helps people file a provisional. It's
Yeah.
kind of a templating system and guided. But
And,
what are
and by the
your
way, that works pretty well. The ones that I've seen, and here's what your PPA has to do. It has to explain to somebody how to make the product and how to use it. And if it does that, then it's probably adequate. Now, if you're writing your own using one of these templates or you're writing your own provisional application, great. I say do it, file it as soon as you can, get a filing date at the patent office, but then don't rely on it. Show it to someone like me or your patent practitioner so that we can make sure that it's doing what it's supposed to be doing.
Mhm. I've known some inventors, they'll file their provisional and they're really concerned about it. I'm like, just go out and try to license it. And then when they get interest, I say, well, the first thing you do is not showing them your provisional patent, it's talking about the product. You could still have an attorney review it, like you, Kevin, before they show it to a company. And you might go, let's fix this. Let's file another one before you show
Right.
it to them, and then you show them the better one, and you got the original date from the first one and next date from the next one. That is
Yeah.
something that people can
I,
do.
I would rather have a possibly inadequate provisional application filed early than a professionally written provisional application filed too late.
Hmm.
Because right now we are on a first to file system. So the first inventor who files at the patent office is going to get the rights, and that includes with a PPA.
I because I know you pretty well, Kevin, I know what you're going to say to this. I think I do. But let's see. I'll see if I guessed. I'll be honest. I'll tell you if I guessed right or not after you answer
Okay.
it. Raphael says, "Do you help with existing patents that are pending?" I think I know what you're going to answer. Like almost any attorney is going to give the same answer.
Well, so our general policy is no. If what you mean by that is if the patent gets rejected, can we help with that rejection, after you've been pending for some number of years? And we have enough patents that we've written that get rejected. We have, I don't want really necessarily to deal with some other practitioner's problems with their application that they wrote. That's a general rule. I will take a look at it on a case-by-case basis, but generally, I would say you probably want to go back to the person who helped you write it, and because they're going to be more familiar with it.
Yeah, I would say, Raphael, like, why are you questioning your patent attorney? You got him to file the patent. Now it's pending. What are the issues you're having? Why don't you have confidence in your existing patent attorney? And in general, other patent attorneys do not want to deal with another patent attorney's filing. Kevin's actually way more open. I think most patent attorneys would go, hell no, not touching it. They're they did it. I don't know. They write because all patent attorneys, there's not one way. They all have different styles.
Yeah,
Kevin's nodding his head, and they're
yeah.
like, "I don't like what this guy did," and then you're trying to. The question is, why are you questioning your patent attorney's competence? Really.
Well, and sometimes patent attorneys lose people's confidence, and I understand that. And and
True.
and so
Could happen.
I will, and so I will take a look at it. If you're an InventRight student, I will take a look at it and see. I might still say no, depending on how it looks. Because it can be a real headache to try to fix someone else's spaghetti patent.
We're going to try to figure out what Ron is saying here, and we can unmute Ron. I don't know if he's on. Oh, Ron's right there. Great. So I'll read it, and I'll unmute you, Ron, if you need to expand on what you wrote here. Um, Kevin, we all know that what a speed square brought to the carpentry industry, and also how it cannot be improved on. Okay, I don't know if that's true. They can't be improved on. How could a new product that may be on the same playing field be protected for longer than the current patent term? So I think what Ron's saying is there any tricks that you can go beyond the 20 years? And Ron, is there anything you want to expand on what I just read what you wrote?
No, that's it.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so the patent office has an interest in giving inventors a limited monopoly, like the Constitution established, but it's limited in time, and so they don't want to give you extra time on the same invention. So really, the only way that you can quote unquote extend the life of your patent is to improve it. So if 10 years out, you file your patent and 10 years later you've come up with 2 or 3 improvements, you can file the patents on those improvements, but those improvements have to be patentable over and above your first patent. In other words, they have to be significant. You have to be making significant improvement. Now, if you're innovating quickly and your first patent is still pending, and you come up with an improvement on that, you can actually file what's called a continuation in part. It's what some people call an improvement patent, and you'll tie those 2 patents together. As long as the parent application, the first one, is still pending, then you can file the CIP, the improvement patent, and they'll be in the same patent family. And now you're developing a patent portfolio, which can actually look more attractive to potential licensees and acquirers. So, when you file your patent, don't necessarily take your inventor's hat off. Your competitors are going to be looking at this thing like, how do we get around this patent? Well, you should try to be your own competitor and beat them to the punch with the CIPs. And if you can have 3, 4, 5 different patents in that family, that begins to look like a pretty hard hurdle for a competitor to get over. So again, talk to your patent practitioner about what you have. If it's too late, if the patent already issued and you don't have anything pending, then your improvement has to be patentable over and above what you did before, because your previous patent can be used against your new one, even though it's the same inventor.
That's why I use the speed square as an example.
How
do you improve that? You can't.
You've got to be the inventor. I don't know. Maybe there is a way.
Well, I'll give you a more common example, Ron, is you license a product to a company, it's selling really well, right? It's been selling for 3 years, let's say. You're getting royalties on it. You as the inventor, it is your job, and you're slacking off. You're not being a Ken Johnson that was here earlier if you don't do this. You're thinking, forget about patents for a second. You're thinking, what's the next version? What's the next version a competitor could knock mine off and start hurting my royalties? What's a product line extension so I can earn even more money? They love me because they've been earning royalties for me for 3 years now. How can I extend this product line? And then you get patents around those answers. So you shouldn't say, how can I make my patent more than 20 years? You can say, how can I keep this product alive in the marketplace more than 20 years with all the line extensions, and then get patents around those things. So, but I get what your more complicated question is. How do I get a patent on something that can't be improved upon? My answer is 99% of the time, most ideas, maybe a speed square isn't. I'm not a carpenter. I'm a DIY guy, but I'm not a carpenter. Maybe that can't be improved upon. But most products over time, they're going to get old in some way. They're going to get tired in some way. You can almost always improve upon them somewhat. That helpful?
Yeah, no, that's very helpful. It's just that my idea is limited to such a small space in actual square inches that I don't think it could be improved on.
Okay. Yeah. I without, talking about the specific product, which you should not in the group here.
I'm not.
It's yeah. But you know what? Earning royalties on a product for 20 years, if it can't be improved upon and people want to keep buying it, congratulations. That's rare. What Ken has done is extremely rare.
And hopefully you've built the brand in that 20 years that people still keep asking for it, by name.
Yeah, and it comes down to first to market.
Yes, yeah. And best form of protection, I know Kevin's here, but I'm going to say is not a patent. It's licensing to a really big company and bringing it first to market, and them having incredible distribution and just crushing all the competition with their pricing and their marketing and their branding.
And enforcing the IP rights,
And doing that too. Yep. When they send you a cease and desist to somebody that's infringing, they're going to listen to that big Mattel company, but some other rinky-dink company, let's say you're making and selling it yourself, they might not really listen. So all they need to do is send a cease and desist, and people listen usually. Let's move on here. Thank you, Ron. That was a great question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, this is a good general. Bev says, thanks for being here, Kevin. Can you give any advice about IP protection for toys and games in India? So I'll expand that. Can you explain? I know there's some people here that don't understand, patents protect you in the countries in which you have them. But can you go ahead and answer Bev's specific question for protecting toys and games in India, and then speak generally about patents around the world?
Well, I'm not registered in India. I don't know the particular rules there. Every country has their own patent laws. So, you would probably want to have an Indian patent attorney to see if they're equivalent laws, with the United States. I can say the general way that you protect your product internationally is you file in your home country first, and then you have a year under the Paris Convention to file in your foreign countries. The way most people do that now is with a PCT application, which is a patent cooperation treaty application. And if you want to learn more about that, you go to wipo.int. Just type that in your browser. WIPO, WIPO.int, stands for the World Intellectual Property Organization. They're kind of trying to be the worldwide patent office, and they're doing a pretty good job. And then you can learn about the PCT application for utility patents and the Hague Agreement for design patents. And I think they also do the Madrid Protocol for trademarks, but I can't do
Okay,
so.
Kevin, I have a great idea. This is a billion-dollar idea, Kevin.
Okay.
I want to patent this thing around the world. What does that cost?
Oh, well, let's see. So in the United States, you'd want to get your patent done in the United States first. So call that 4,500 through us. Then to file a PCT application within a year, that's about 3,000. And then you have an additional 18 months to figure out what countries you want to file in. I like to think of the PCT, it's kind of like a worldwide provisional application. And it gives you an additional 18 months beyond the 12 months. So 30 months total, 2.5 years, to figure out what countries you want to file your national stage applications in. $4,000 to $5,000 per country, depending on if you need to translate it from English into Japan or something, right? Japanese, or whatever language that they require. Europe is a regional patent. There's a new thing called a unity patent, which covers all the countries in Europe, and that's like 16,000, I think was the last time I heard. That does not include the UK, which is another 4 to 5, right? So it adds up. I mean, it's certainly expensive, and you want to pick your countries smartly. You don't want to just go every country. You can't afford to do that. No one can afford to do that. So there are countries where your market is just not going to be big enough to justify the expense of the patent in that country. Yeah. So that's where you have to.
Well, when even large corporations rarely file, a lot of them they just file in the U.S. Maybe a few select countries, many of them don't. What does that tell you guys?
Yeah, they'll file in most of the big countries, and by big I mean the big economies. But yeah, you're not going to get a lot of patent filings in the smaller countries.
Yeah, but anyway, most of you can't afford to file around the world. Most of the time, it's not necessary. That's not legal advice. You have to determine what's right for you.
And by the way, just because you don't have a patent in Zimbabwe doesn't mean that you can't sell the product there.
Yeah,
you can. A patent is not a license to make and sell something. It's a license to stop someone else from making and selling something. So you can sell all day long in Japan if you don't have a Japanese patent. You just can't stop other people from copying you in Japan if you don't have a Japanese patent.
Right. And I'll give you an example, and then we'll jump on with you, Lori. I know you typed something in there. We'll let you ask it just of Kevin. We had this member of ours at InventRight that had a U.S. patent, and actually they just had a provisional. And this company that they were working on licensing to, they sold about 70% of their product in the US and about 30% in Europe. And they said, we'll do a licensing deal with you. We'll pay you for this, but we're not paying you in Europe. You don't have a patent there. And I simply told them, I said, well, this solution's easy. Tell them if you want to be able to sell this in the US, you have to pay me in Europe too. I don't care. I don't got a patent there. You guys are probably going to file there anyway. And they're like, oh, okay. So this person got royalties in Europe. The company sold in Europe, most of their products in the US, and they didn't even want to file. They were just trying to come up with an excuse not to pay him, but he leveraged his US patent to get him to pay him in a country. Kevin's right. It's just doesn't mean you can't sell it.
If you hit all the big markets, you're going to lock up 80-90% of the world's markets,
Yeah. Yeah. So let's go to Lori. Lori had a very specific question, but hopefully it helps other folks too. Go ahead, Lori.
Onto an anvil trying to float, but I got granted 2 patents for a pet product 17 years ago, and due to medical issues, I just got to pay the maintenance fees, and it sat there. And I luckily at the time had my dog, so I was refining the product. and also thinking ahead. Like I think it was Robert who asked the question, so I'm on the tail of his question about knocking myself off. I'm an industrial designer, so I've been like trying to think ahead. What would other companies do? And I have about 6 or 7 variations that would be, that's what I'm trying to figure out, is how to keep the last remaining 3 years that I know the product will be knocked off immediately anyway, once it gets into the pet market. And the brand won't be established enough, no matter whether I do it myself or get a big enough company to build a brand within 3 years. Say that it gets to market in a year or 2 if I'm lucky, and I want to start building a relationship with the company. What's like your eyeglass design with polarized lens is a great example. Is there a way that you can tell me how much variation the design would have to be before it becomes a separate utility patent?
Well, Kevin, I got the answer to this is exactly 3.68% variation. People,
No.
it's funny, people ask that question all the time. No,
Yeah,
it's not
and
true. That's a
I've
joke.
heard 10%, and what the heck
No,
is
no.
10% of a product? You know, you can't.
I know.
So
People
here's,
ask that question all the time,
yeah.
Lori, so I love that you asked it, but there is no such thing.
Well,
Is it
but
like how much money you have to fight it?
so from a utility patent standpoint, here's something that could be helpful. On the InventRight website, I wrote a 3-part article called, I don't know, something like The Average Joe's Guide to Writing Patent Claims. And I just use a simple product like a chair,
Mhm.
and I go through, and it all comes down to the claims. The claims are the last section of your utility patent.
Yeah.
It defines the scope of protection. So if you have claim 1 protects A, B, and C, elements A, B, and C, anybody who's making A, B, and C while that patent is active is infringing your patent. Okay. Now, if they're making just A and B and X or some other component that they figure out how to do it without doing C, they're not infringing your patent.
Oh, wow.
So your patent, original patent, say it had A, B, and C, and now you're adding like D and E and F. You can do that, and if D, E, and F are patentable by themselves, you can get a patent on that, but it's going to cover A, B, C, D, E, and F maybe.
Okay.
So it's going to be very difficult for you to protect the original one after your patent expires.
Okay.
But put your inventor's hat on and keep innovating. And times change, different people's needs change. There may be opportunities there. You just gotta look at it.
Well, this group is how it's making it's getting real. So I get emotional about it because I wanna hit the ground and make it real outside of my little bubble. So thank you. That's kind of hopeful.
I'm glad we could do that for you. And you realize you're not alone. You got all these other inventors here. Hey, I'm not weird. There's a whole bunch of other people just
Oh,
like
no,
me
I'm
coming up
weird.
with ideas, We may be
We are
weird to
weird.
our family and friends, but here we're all friends. We're all creative people,
And thank you for the
struggling
Zoom.
struggling with the boring business side of things to try to get your product to market, right?
It's not boring to us. That's
Yeah.
what's cool about
Well, no, I'm not talking about the inventing part. I'm talking about the business side.
it.
A lot of people, they're like, oh, now I got to go from just coming up with ideas to actually working on them and doing the work. That's a hard
Hey Andrew,
transition.
I hate to interrupt, but I'm
Yep.
I'm on a hard deadline at 6. I got to be at a place 30 minutes away in 20
Great.
minutes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So guys,
So let me just I'll just put in the chat how to get a hold of us.
I put in quick patents a couple times.
Okay, good. Yeah, I'm willing to do a
Quickpatents.com.
free 30-minute consultation with anyone to get you pointed in the right direction, even if it's away from us, that's fine. Happy to talk to anyone.
Good, good, good. Okay, everybody, take care, keep inventing. And if you want to visit Kevin on quickpatents.com. See you guys.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Appreciate it.
Bye.
Hey, Andrew.
Yeah.
Oh, before you go, I just want to say thank you for creating the Zoom room. What is it called? 24/7.
Yeah, if you're an InventRight member. Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
great.
that's kind of a trip. I have to give Stephen credit for wanting to do that. Sometimes people weren't understanding it. They show up, there's nobody in here. It's like, well, it's a place where InventRight members can get together.
I think it'll
So
pick up. I think
yeah,
people.
I think it's fun. At least a place where people can congregate. If they're
Yeah,
InventRight members, hey, I'll meet you in that Zoom room or something. So thank
absolutely.
you. All right,
Yeah,
guys.
You guys.
Thank you, everybody. I'll send your thank yous to Ken. See you guys. Bye.